Hey guys, Eckhart Slaughter here with another episode of Star Wars Starship vs. the series, where I take two of your favorite Star Wars ships, put them head to head to see which one comes out on top. And we've got a fun Star Wars Legends matchup for today. Two of the largest and most powerful spaceships in Star Wars history go head to head, with the Super Star Destroyer Eclipse taking on the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship. As always, I'm going to evaluate these ships through several categories: weaponry systems, defensive capabilities, fighter support, and then intangibles. Now, just because a ship wins 2 or even 3 categories doesn't necessarily mean that it wins the matchup, because I'm going to be looking at these two ships overall. As always, this is a one-on-one battle, and we're only looking at the standard configuration of each ship. And we're also going to assume that each ship is controlled by equally competent pilots and officers. Alright, first off, a bit about these two ships, and we'll talk first about the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer. The Eclipse was actually a class of 2 ships that was created by the Empire after the Galactic Civil War, and it was huge, 17.5 kilometers, and actually very tall when compared to most other types of Star Destroyers. Probably the most notable thing about the Eclipse was that it had a dedicated super laser running down the spine of the ship. Now, this wasn't quite as powerful as, say, the Death Star laser beam, but it could still easily destroy ships or even crack a continent in half. On the other hand, we have what I consider to be a quite vile Yuuzhan Vong Worldship. At over 100 kilometers long and wide, this biological ship served as both the home of the Yuuzhan Vong while invading the Star Wars galaxy and their most powerful battleship. And really, this thing is more of a flying moon than a real spaceship. Its propulsion, its weaponry systems, and its defensive systems were all biological, as were things like its propulsion, its life support systems, its gravity generators, basically everything. So a formal comparison of these two ships is going to be difficult, but let's try to do so anyway, and we'll start first with weaponry systems. The Eclipse class Super Star Destroyer, which, as I briefly mentioned before, was actually a class of ships, were both pretty similar. They were both extraordinarily well armed, with over 1,000 heavy laser cannons and turbo lasers, various ion cannons and point defense cannons, and most notably, an axial super laser. And I mean, this axial super laser is extraordinarily powerful, and at the time that the Eclipse was really around, it could easily knock out any ship in one shot with the laser. And for example, an unfinished Eclipse actually one-shotted an Executor Super Star Destroyer at the Battle of Quat. However, the full power of the super laser couldn't even really be seen in space, and the Eclipse could effectively destroy a planet by piercing its core. Now, this wasn't the same kind of destruction that a Death Star would bring about, but it would still effectively ruin the planet by destroying it from the inside out. On the other hand, the main weapon of the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship was the Yarick core, and these were essentially organic entities that shot superheated rock at starships. Now, given that they're organic, no two Yarick core was the exact same, so it's kind of hard to get an idea of how powerful the ship would have been. However, these weaponry systems just generally are said to be more powerful than traditional turbo lasers. The ship also made use of other biological weapons, including worms that lived on board, which could be used to burrow through enemy ships. And I mean, at 100 kilometers lengthwise and widthwise, this ship would have had hundreds, if not thousands, of these Yuuzhan Vong weapon emplacements. Still, I really think it's hard to argue with the Eclipse class's axial super laser. And I mean, the thing is meant to crack into planets, so I do think it will be effective against the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship. So I'll give this category to the Eclipse. Alright, next we have to talk about defensive capabilities, and this is another interesting one because we see the ultimate in technological innovation in the Eclipse go against the Yuuzhan Vong's biological warfare. The Eclipse was extraordinarily powerful, and the new Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels says that it could ram a ship without any sort of difficulty and without hesitance. Both its array of lasers and its hundreds of starfighters also would have made it extremely effective against enemy craft. On the other hand, the main defensive weapon of the Yuuzhan Vong was the Dovin Basil, another biological creation. And these creations acted as a kind of shield, using gravity to deflect laser bolts, missiles, or other weapons. However, numerous battles showed that, like traditional shielding technologies, these were not infallible. Interestingly, Dovin Basils also had other unique properties, mostly because of how they affected gravity. Primarily, they could slow ships' movement and prevent them from jumping through hyperspace, and they could actually rip the shields off enemy vessels if the right circumstances were met. However, I think it also should be noted that the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer also had the most advanced gravity well generators available at its time. I'm not really sure how these two entities affecting gravity, both on their own, would really impact each other, and I'm not sure how the mechanical defenses of the Eclipse can be compared with the organic defenses of the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship, so I'm going to call this category a tie. Finally, we get to carrying capacity, and this one goes to the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship. It could carry thousands of coral skippers. Now, not all these coral skippers would probably be used at once, because they also served functions within the ship, including propulsion. However, I do think that these ships would be more than a match for the Eclipse's almost 700 TIE interceptors and TIE bombers. And I think this is largely because the Yuuzhan Vong ships use some of the technology, including the gravity interference that I just described. So, as I said, I give this category to the Yuuzhan Vong. Now, let's quickly look at intangibles, and I don't have a whole lot that I'd like to mention here. The first thing is that the Yuuzhan Vong ships actually have a life cycle, given that they're organic creatures. They also vary greatly in size, from, less than 10 kilometers up to the 120 kilometers plus. So, to make this battle interesting, I've chosen a ship that is in its healthy stages of life and around 100 kilometers wide and long, which is about the upper limit. I've also heavily taken into note the Battle of Borlias. There, the New Republic Super Star Destroyer, the Lusenka, which was a captured Imperial Executor class Super Star Destroyer, rammed a Yuuzhan Vong Worldship and destroyed it. That has impacted how I perceive the durability of the Worldships, especially because that ship was actually a fully healthy Yuuzhan Vong Worldship. Okay, so on to the actual battle itself, and I really think that this all comes down to the super laser. In my mind, the Eclipse is much more well-armed, pound per pound, than the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship, and I think a pretty big part of this is that the Yuuzhan Vong ships were meant not only for war, but also for transportation and just basically general accommodation of the Yuuzhan Vong species. And I think the general weaponry of the Eclipse will be able to overwhelm the Dove and Basils of the Yuuzhan Vong ships. It's got thousands of turbo lasers and ion cannons, which I think will be able to keep the ship pretty busy. At that point, the Eclipse would fire its super laser at the Yuuzhan Vong ship, piercing it to its core and effectively disabling it. I think that this would be a devastating blow. The weapon was meant to crack open planets and has been shown to be able to one-shot a Super Star Destroyer. At this point, I think the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship will be, if not completely destroyed, out of fighting condition. At that point, the only real problem for the Eclipse will be the many fighters housed by the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship, and although the TIE interceptors are massively outranked by the Yuuzhan Vong fighters, I do think that they, when combined with the turbo laser and the laser emplacements, will be able to hold them off. All in all, I think that this will be a really interesting battle, but the more well-armed Eclipse is almost unstoppable in a one-on-one space battle. And I mean, let's face it, the Eclipse was basically created to inflict great damage upon planets, and that's pretty much what the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship is. So I give this battle to the Imperial Super Dreadnought 7.5 times out of 10. I think the only real chance that the Yuuzhan Vong ship has is if it can tank at least one super laser shot from the Eclipse, get all of its fighters launched, and then somehow overwhelm the defenses of the Imperial Super Star Destroyer. I think all of those things will be massively difficult to do. Anyways guys, I really hope you enjoyed this matchup. Post down in the comment what battle you guys would like to see next, and if you see a starship matchup that you guys like, make sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a little comment saying that you approve of it. Tell me, did I get this one right? Did I underestimate the Yuuzhan Vong Worldship, or perhaps give too much credit to the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer? I will admit, I am a huge fan of all of the Imperial Super Dreadnoughts, so it might be a bit hard for me to be completely unbiased. Also, if you got this far, let me know down in the comments what difference you think 2 Eclipse Super Star Destroyers would have made during the Yuuzhan Vong War. Also, do you think that the Galactic Empire, as controlled by Emperor Palpatine, would have done worse or better than the New Republic did when fighting the Yuuzhan Vong? Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, may the Force be with you.